A Cask of Revenge. Chapter 1. The Shadow of the Past. The tale begins with a man named Casimir, an ambitious and cunning aristocrat. Reflecting on the painful events of his youth, for decades he has lived under the weight of betrayal and humiliation. His name had once been synonymous with trust and nobility, but those days were long gone. A man named Obadiah, once a close friend and confidant, had poisoned his reputation. Obadiah, a man whose charisma was only rivaled by his deceitfulness, had convinced many in Casimir's social circle that Casimir was a traitor, stealing from his own family and plotting against his closest allies. The false rumors had cost Casimir his fortune, his standing in society, and, most painfully, his beloved fiancée, Mariana. Years had passed, but the sting of betrayal was still fresh. Casimir, now hardened by time and sorrow, vowed vengeance. He meticulously observed Obadiah's life, looking for the right moment to strike. His goal was not just to ruin Obadiah, but to bring him to a slow and agonizing downfall. An exquisite revenge served cold and calculated. Chapter 2. The perfect plan. Casimir spent countless hours devising the perfect scheme. His thirst for revenge was not driven by rage, but by the quiet, persistent ache of injustice. It was not enough to merely expose Obadiah for the fraud he was. Casimir wanted to take everything from him: his dignity, his wealth, his future. Casimir knew that Obadiah was a man of luxury, deeply attached to his social image and his reputation. His vanity would be his greatest weakness. Casimir also understood that Obadiah was prone to the indulgence of fine wine, a passion that had been carefully cultivated over the years. The plan began to take shape as Casimir sought out the most exquisite vintage wine, a rare Amontillado. He knew that this wine would serve as a perfect lure. His invitation to Obadiah would be framed as an offer to sample a bottle of the finest Amontillado. What Obadiah did not know was that the wine would not be his true fate, but rather a small piece of a much darker game. Chapter 3. The Invitation. After months of preparation, Casimir finally sent the invitation to Obadiah. The message was simple and cordial. I have procured a rare bottle of Amontillado. I invite you to join me to share it, as old friends should. Casimir had made sure that the note was as sincere as possible. Obadiah would never suspect anything amiss. After all, he had long believed that Casimir was finished, no longer a threat, no longer a figure of consequence. But Casimir was far from finished. Obadiah responded with an eager acceptance, clearly excited by the prospect of tasting such a rare wine. Casimir smiled at the thought. He had waited for this moment for years. Chapter 4. The Encounter. The evening arrived. The grand, dimly lit chambers of Casimir's estate felt cold and foreboding, perfect for the grim purpose that was about to unfold. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the hallway, and Casimir knew that Obadiah had arrived. Obadiah was dressed in his usual finery, wearing an air of superiority as he crossed the threshold. Casimir greeted him with a cordial smile and led him to the grand cellar where the Amontillado was kept. The stone walls of the cellar were thick and damp, and the air smelled of aged oak and earth. Obadiah was delighted. Ah, Casimir, this is magnificent. I can already taste the excellence in the air. You've outdone yourself. Double quotes. Casimir single quotes as smile remained, but inside he was cold. I'm glad you think so. I had it brought in from the farthest reaches of the continent. It's something rare, something No one else would dare to offer. As they descended deeper into the cellar, Casimir could see the subtle pride in Obadiah's face. The wine was everything Casimir needed, but as Obadiah moved closer to examine the casks, Casimir's mind wandered. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. Chapter 5. The inescapable trap. Casimir led Obadiah deeper into the cellar, where a narrow, dark passageway awaited them. It had been prepared in advance. With walls lined with bricks and mortar, Casimir had spent weeks ensuring that the passage would be sealed and airtight. Obadiah, if you will, Casimir said, gesturing towards the narrow passage. The wine I wish to show you is at the end of this path. The taste is more than worth the walk. Obadiah, ever the fool, moved forward without hesitation, convinced of his superiority and the wealth he was about to taste. Casimir followed silently, his steps deliberate. The moment Obadiah entered the passage, Casimir made his move. He had planned it all along. With swift and practiced hands, he began to seal the entrance. Obadiah turned, his face suddenly stricken with confusion and fear. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and panic. Sealing you in, Casimir replied, his voice cold and devoid of mercy. "I'm afraid you've outlived your usefulness. The world no longer has room for your lies." Obadiah's eyes widened in terror as he stumbled back, trying to escape, but it was too late. The stones were already in place, and Casimir's work was almost complete. Chapter 6. The last words. Obadiah's single closest cries echoed through the cellar. As the walls closed in, his frantic pleas for mercy were drowned out by the sound of the stone walls being tightened, brick by brick. Casimir stood there, unmoved by his old friend's desperation. You were never a friend to me, Obadiah. You took everything I had, my family's wealth, my reputation, and the woman I loved. You made me a pariah, and now I will return the favor. Obadiah's voice trembled. Please, Casimir, I beg you, I never meant it. It was all a mistake. I never wanted to hurt you. But Casimir's heart was as cold as the stone that surrounded them. He watched with detached satisfaction as Obadiah struggled for breath, his final moments slipping away in the same manner he had lived, trapped by his own lies. Chapter 7. The silent end. The final bricks were in place, and the passage was sealed. Casimir stood there, looking at the smooth wall where Obadiah had once been. There was no triumph in his eyes, only a quiet, bitter satisfaction. He had avenged his family and reclaimed what had been lost. But as he turned to leave, something changed. A strange emptiness settled within him. For all the years he had spent planning, for all the careful execution, the victory felt hollow. The past, with all its broken promises and pain, could never truly be erased. Casimir left the cellar, the door creaking shut behind him. His revenge had been served, but at what cost? Chapter 8. The price of vengeance. Months passed, and Casimir resumed his life, but the shadow of Obadiah's death haunted him. His estate felt colder, emptier, and despite his outward success, a part of him knew he would never be free. He had achieved his revenge, but at a terrible price. The social circles that once celebrated him now whispered about the mysterious death of Obadiah, and Casimir was always watching, always listening, waiting for the truth to be uncovered. His mind began to unravel as he realized that no amount of revenge could truly mend the wounds of the past. Chapter 9. The weight of guilt. Casimir's mind grew more and more consumed by the memories of his actions. The death of Obadiah had brought him no peace. In fact, it had made him more restless, more paranoid. He began to see Obadiah's ghost in every shadow, hear his voice in every creak of the floorboards. The vengeance he had once longed for now seemed like a hollow echo. One night, after a long evening of reflection, Casimir wandered back to the cellar. He stood before the sealed wall, his heart heavy with regret. "What have I done?" he whispered to the cold stone. Chapter 10 The True Revenge. In the end, Casimir realized that revenge had not come at the expense of Obadiah alone. It had cost him his soul. The thing he had sought for so long the destruction of. His enemy had ultimately destroyed him. The true revenge, he now understood, was not in the death of Obadiah, but in the unraveling of his own life. Casimir was left with nothing but the silence of the cellar and the weight of his own remorse. Thus ended the story of Casimir and Obadiah. It was not a tale of triumph, but of a man who sought vengeance only to find that it was the darkness within himself that was truly his enemy. The cask of revenge had been sealed long ago, but in the end, it was not Obadiah's death that haunted Casimir. It was the emptiness left in its wake.